Welcome back, everyone, to 101 Questions that Church Planters Ask. I'm one of your hosts, Danny Parmelee.
And I'm Chris Highfill.
And today we're going to be answering the question, what sort of leadership structure should I have during the pre-launch phase? So we're going to be kind of, we have some thoughts on at least the way that it has worked well for us in the church, in our specific church plants and church planters that we work with. And we kind of want to separate out the legal structure versus kind of your leadership structure that you're using with your volunteers, with your launch team. And so for us, the legal structure is what we call a triad. And that includes the church planter and then two other pastors that are not a part of the church. So you basically have this outside governing board. And the reason that you have this is that this allows you as the church planter to have a lot of leadership and decision-making power that you can do pretty quickly. And we know that in culture, everything's about team and, everyone gets a say and that type of thing. And we do understand that. But for the most part, in a church plant, you do want to retain a lot of that speed and agility in making decisions and all of the decisions and to make the decisions quickly, still with a slight layer of accountability by having those outside pastors. And so we call that the triad board. That gets reflected in your bylaws and in your articles of incorporation, which if that is complicated to you, we've got other podcasts, you can listen to that. But then as far as the actual leadership structure of those that start to join your team, we would just say as a general statement, as a principle, to keep that as loose and as fluid as possible. And so what we mean by that is that you don't have, all right, this is, I've got this outside governance board, but, here it's me and two of my buddies, and we're the ones that make all the decisions, and we meet once a month, and, we go through the finances and those types of things. Chris, chime in a little bit on that.
Yeah, you want to make sure you're not related to those two people.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, right? That there is some layer of accountability there, because even as we say it, some of you are like, you feel a little icky about that. I can just tell, even though I haven't met you in person. But I'm telling you, you want to be able to make quick decisions, not dumb decisions. That's why your triad is there as a board to help guide and navigate you from doing something dumb. But man, in those first 3 years, especially first 2 to 3 years, there are two things that will slow down the growth of a new church. And one of them is an unclear maturity pathway. And then also the second one is slow decision making. And you will have slow decision making if you establish an elder board or whatever it is that you're going to have. One day you'll have that in your church. Yeah. Some kind of a board of overseers or whatever you decide to call it, that are actually functioning inside of your church. We're saying this is a temporary situation. Yeah. And really, it's so you can make quick decisions very early on, and that's going to help accelerate the life of your church for the long run. That's not the way it's going to be forever, but in these initial days, it's super critical.
Yeah, and Chris, you make an excellent point there that eventually you will have an internal board or elder board, board of overseers, whatever you call it. But in those beginning days that you just have the outside board, the outside pastors that really do create accountability. You are submitting financial statements to them. If you're making decisions over a certain amount of, money or just a big thing, you want to lean on them. You want to use that. That's also important because you will have launch team members or new people who come to the church, and they will ask the question because there has been so much leadership abuse and power abuse. Well, who do you report to? You're able to say, hey, this is the board that I speak to. At the same time, we're not saying don't get input and don't do decisions in a vacuum. Your launch team is just a great wealth. Use it though as input, not for voting. So the most dangerous thing that you can do is where you start to take votes on things. And I did this, like, okay, hey, when are we going to meet? Who's going to be on this committee or who's going to be on this team? And let's all vote for this. And then you start having people vote and they're like, oh yeah, I really like this thing. I need to cast my vote for just about everything. But instead what you say,
this is not a democracy.
Yeah, this is not a democracy. So I had one of my early church plant coaches, he used the word benevolent dictatorship. And maybe you don't want to tell that to people, but in your own mind, it was at least helpful for me as I kind of moved away from trying to get votes and to try to get consensus or majority vote on everything, but instead find ways that you ask for input. So let's say, for example, hey, are we going to meet at this old church building on a Sunday night, or are we going to, meet in this storefront on a Saturday, whatever. I'm just making some stuff up here. Don't take a vote on it, but instead ask people, hey, what do you think about this? And you can tell them, hey, I want to get as much input as I can, but I'm going to take this back, to my board. I'm going to take some time to pray on it, and I'm going to be the one making the decision on that. I think just helps with the clarity instead of saying, oh, there's going to be this team of launch team members that then will make the decision on this. So,
the only time they voted in the Bible, it went bad. So that's a really important thing. Every time they voted in the Bible, it always went bad. You can do the research yourself. It never went well when they voted on things. And I would also say it's like a great way to get input is the personal ask, like what Danny just mentioned. Hey, I'm thinking about this. My board and I are going to make a decision about it. What do you think? And also surveying people, just finding out like, hey, does this time work for you? Like going back to when's the best time to meet? Like survey people and get that data, get that information. You can do a survey and that's a lot less entitlement than, hey, will you vote for this?
Right.
It's not worth it when it comes to voting.
And you mentioned kind of this this time period, 2 to 3 years, 4 years. I think for you guys at Grace River it was 4 years. For us it was 4 years as well too, before we had a board that was made up of members of the actual church. Use that time. It's not like you do nothing and then all of a sudden you're at that 4-year mark and it's like, okay, we need some board members. Who wants to do that? You're using this entire time as kind of a testing ground, which is a biblical principle for the deacons and the elders that they would be tested first. So what you want to do is, even as you're doing this, having these individual conversations, giving responsibility, see how people respond when their idea isn't, taken, because then you can find those people who will be excellent board members, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So all of that to say, for your, especially in the pre-launch phase, keep things as fluid and flexible. Be careful of creating kind of these sub-executive committee that's making all the decisions, even if that is somewhat the case. Make sure, in other words, like if there's like 3 or 4 people that you're always leaning on, just make sure that every once in a while you're meeting with different groups of people or different individuals to get that input so it just doesn't get solidified too early.
I called mine short-term advisory teams is what I called mine. And so they were always these short-term teams where we could get advice from people, and then we'd always throw a hand grenade in it when it was over with. And then that way, hey, we got a new decision to make. I'm going to develop a new short-term advisory team. And that helped a ton.
Yeah, and to make advisory teams even on specific things, that's an excellent point, Chris. So you can have an advisory team on, hey, we're searching for facilities. We need a facilities advisory team. Oh, man, beautiful. That group is specifically responsible for gathering information, giving input on it. But at the end of the day, again, you as the planter, in conjunction with your real outside board, they're making that decision. Yes, we're going to rent here. We're going to buy this, whatever, buy this storefront.
And test these people out. I mean, it's a great chance. I mean, I remember learning from my first church planting coach. He told me, don't set up all the chairs before a meeting. And I'm like, why? Because it's like it proves who's willing to be a servant and set the chairs up, right? Like you don't have to always be the one doing everything. And the people that show up to set up, like we don't have enough chairs set up. Well, what do you think we should do? We'll set up some more chairs, right? Like it's good to test those people out and see how they play in the sandbox with other people. Like Danny said, when you don't use their idea, how do they react, right? Like these are really important little things that you can do in these short-term advisory teams to see how it is they work with other people, and you'll be surprised. Somebody that you meet that you thought maybe was board or elder material, you'll find out that, man, that person's kind of a jerk to other people, right? Or they're not teachable, they're not coachable, and they don't pass the test. And so it's just a test that no one knows about the test but you. Because one day those people will be your boss. So you got to think to yourself, am I okay putting my career on the line with these people? And so it's really critical. And if you put the danger, we'll wrap up with this, right? But the danger is if you decide to do an elder or a board, an elder team or a board right out of the gate, we think that's a gigantic mistake. And we have seen that sink so many church plants right out of the gate, because you think you have agenda harmony and you think you have theological harmony and you think you have all this and you did youth ministry together or you were on this worship team together. I'm telling you, it's a different monster. It's a different animal. And it's unwise to come right out of the gate.
We have multiple stories of planters who, with their buddies, even friends, they created the original board. The lead planter goes on vacation, comes back a week later, and the board decided to oust the lead planter. It's ouch, so no longer friendships there. The other quick little tidbit before we close, we would say is that if anybody comes and they're volunteering because they were an elder at their last church and they can serve in this role right away, that's usually a bit of a red flag to just walk very, very slowly with that person. Usually the person that's volunteering and offering up to be an elder because of their past experience as an elder, a bit of a red flag. So thank you so much for listening and watching this episode. And if you have questions, you can head over to our website, Church Planters Ask. You can type your questions in there. We'd love to be able to use them, maybe even have a conversation with you, have you on the podcast as well. And until next time, keep asking those questions.